and welcome to Cold Outreach Success Stories, where we interview business people just like you who found success with cold outreach on email and other channels. We go deep into their process around messaging, targeting, personalization, technical setup, all the boring details, and see how they got success. Today, we have on Jesse Ouellette, who's an amazing follow on LinkedIn. If you haven't followed him on LinkedIn and you're doing anything related to cold outbound, you're missing out. I just saw his profile and he has like 30,000 followers. I thought you were above 30,000. So you're just about that.
Growing,
But yes,
man, every day,
no, I mean, you're everywhere, man. I keep getting your WhatsApp notifications. I keep getting your, your content on LinkedIn. So it's amazing. I see you everywhere.
Well, it's one of those things. I think where I'm looking for leverage is around content and scale. I mean, obviously, the more attention you can drive is part of a never-ending story, I guess, right?
Yeah. So for the folks who don't know you, I mean, if there are a couple in cold outreach who don't know you, just tell them a little bit more about what you do.
Yeah. So right now, my SaaS product Lead Magic tells people who the businesses that are on their site. A lot of the times, companies lose 98% of the companies that come to their website. So we're helping them get that back. We tell them the companies and we tell them kind of how to get to the people. So they'll use LinkedIn, they'll use cold email to do that. One of the funny things is when we're building that, what we also realized was there's a major problem right now with email delivery. And this is where I've been kind of a pretty well-known expert in the space. I mean, it kind of happened, wasn't expected actually, but what happened was, I started to realize about 3 or 4 years ago, I started to see that deliverability was going to be the biggest thing anybody's really talking about. And I think it's starting to become that because really the message doesn't matter anymore because of the way. Well, it matters, but I mean, it matters after you get the deliverability and infrastructure right. And where so many people get this wrong is they start to send emails and they don't realize where they're getting for inbox placement. Remember, the only person who knows where your inbox landed is that of the person on the other side of the equation has to tell you. So if you're sending out 1,000 cold emails, you don't have any idea. Nobody knows, right? So if anybody tells you they know, they're lying, unless the person on the other side told them or the IT team told them or whatever. So that's the biggest problem I see out there today is people can't find people that are relevant and because they just call everybody. And then, there's no real system to it. And then the second thing is around email deliverability, where you start to see people that are landing in the spam folder more than they're landing in the primary inbox because of domain reputation.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those known secrets, right? And in this space, where I know you talk a lot about this on your LinkedIn content, like big SaaS is lying to you, right? Like almost like shouting from the rooftops that this is happening and you're not even realizing it. So in terms of your own cold outreach process, I think now you're pretty well known for your content. Do you do any outbound today for yourself, or is it mostly just
email? Oh yeah. No, I believe it or not, just because one of the things that I've always been annoyed with is, your typical kind of, and look, I kind of say this joking around, but your typical guru who will tell you they know everything about, copy and all this stuff that actually works. And then they go and they start to try to do it, but they could never do it, and I look at just about half the stuff that's out there today, half this, most, maybe more than that, actually, if we really have to be real here. But what you see is a lot of people who just really, really couldn't do it. And if you ask them to go run a cold email campaign, they couldn't do it. Now, I personally I love running cold email campaigns. I do. There's some that I run just as a fun way, for fun. I mean, just because I love it so much. So the passion's there. Anything you like to do and you're good at, you tend to do more of. So, I like to shoot for the stars in some of these campaigns. We'll go for, let's send 1,000 contacts. I mean, sometimes I'll try to do like 30, 40 positive replies on 1,000. I do stuff like that, maybe even higher. But those are the types of things I like to do. I like to, sometimes internally we'll have a contest, like who can run the best campaign. And sometimes we generate too many leads and then we got to go get on the calls. But I know that's not a problem for everybody, but that does happen to us a lot. So anyways.
A lot of the listeners of the show would love to have this problem, right? Like they would love to.
Yeah, I know. Trust me, it took a lot of work to figure out how to do it. I mean, obviously just working with, great people out there, companies like yours and everything else. But, it's just been a really good run for this recently. We've got some pretty good people on the team that really understand cold email better than just about anybody in the world, I think is our perspective, right?
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, never stop running all the channels that you can, right? Like it's one of those things. If you run multiple channels, even if one, I know LinkedIn inbound is great for you, but cold email is a channel you always control, right? You always have a certain targeted audience that you're going after. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the list
Yeah.
building aspect of things. How do
Yeah.
you build lists? What's your top list building advice?
Yeah. So, it's tricky. So if I'm gonna build a list for myself, I'll give you an example. One that I just built yesterday. That was pretty cool. There's no way that they could figure out that it was a cold email that you didn't write it one-to-one. What I mean by that is like, so let's say I'm targeting companies. Let's say this was a particular agency that we're working with that does a lot of Webflow development. They're going after companies that are raising money that want to build a new, platform website for their company. When you think about that audience, your average cold email is going to be like, hey, maybe they go to the technographic level, right? Which is like,
Yeah.
if we go to the level, it's like, I want to find people on WordPress. I want to find them relevant. They just took funding. Okay. That's usually the limitation. What we did on this one that was even more crazy was we lined up all of the page scores on the person as well. So when we're emailing them, we're calling out the page scores.
I see.
And that, could indicate that, if they had very low page scores on, especially on like a mobile or, hey, I saw you were getting, you have this issue, right? We've helped other companies with that. Are you interested in a discussion? Really just a 3-point easy message. But what's funny about it is like the fact that you're more relevant, prospect can't tell that you didn't copy and paste. I mean, we didn't actually do the work. We just ran it through a spreadsheet and then you filled it in. But if they can't tell that and they think, it just shows. And this is my argument. I always get into the battles with kind of the old school gurus who will tell you that you should be doing more research and all this and manual research. I don't think you can really do any manual research now. I think you got to figure out like a system, like I just mentioned, where if I gave you 15,000 contacts that had that same issue, you could go scale that across the 15,000. Every single person on that list is going to think that email campaign is relevant. And that's the difference between somebody who's doing it at that level and then somebody's doing it at another level. Now, do I do every campaign like that? No. I mean, a lot of the times we could just stop at the technographic and we would be fine. But just knowing what website platform they're on now was a big key factor. That's a lot of his companies that had moved forward with him before. So hopefully that's a good example. Like that's how we do it. We build highly relevant targeted lists, and then we call out those highly relevant targeted attributes that we found that would indicate a problem that the person's having.
I think that's a great example. Like I'd like to dive a little deeper into the actual list building aspect of it. So how did you find that these are the websites that I want to go after? Like what was the search filter? What platform did you use?
So this one particularly, we just used Crunchbase. So there's quality of data, of course, you understand, and certain websites have certain fields done pretty well. Crunchbase has been pretty accurate for me in the long run on funding round. And when people raise money, and it's pretty up to date. It's really good and active and everything. So that's kind of like what's going on with that one. That's why we chose that. And then just for the data, we just ran a validation through. So we kind of did that, but really just finding like it was a director of marketing role. It's probably that mid-tiered marketer that builds that takes the website. So that's kind of like who we went after in this campaign. Hopefully that was a explanation.
Makes a ton of sense. Makes a ton of sense. So if they've raised funding, so they have money and they have low paid scores, so they have a need, right? So suddenly the email is highly relevant and the list is highly relevant as well. So makes sense.
Yeah, and the funding is an interesting one because there's a lot of people who go after people for funding, and then they're like, it's a me story. What I mean by that is they go after people and they're like, hey, me, I saw you got a bunch of money. Everyone's doing that. However, if you come where everybody fails is they miss like a step like this, where the 1% kind of improvement or the 1% in the top people, what they do is they see another statistic, like I just mentioned, hey, you just received funding. So first of all, you have to move faster and you have the cash, right? So you got to move faster, right? And your best salesperson is your website, of course, as everybody knows. What we do is we know that if we add on this other use case where they're just getting funding, it's like, hey, you should be doing this. Now they're in that journey. Now it's a trigger. It's relevant. I've got, a bunch of triggers that we use. I mean,
Mhm.
I love thinking about new ones,
Name
because
some, yeah.
not even
Name,
like a,
name
what's
some
up?
triggers. Like, let's go into triggers now
Yeah.
because that's been one of my favorite recent topics. Like, I know I think Justin Michael wrote about this. No email should be sent without a trigger right now. Like, just don't, right? Just don't send it if you don't have a trigger.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny because a lot of the people out there, you'll see people doing it. I can give you the ones that we typically use. So one of the things I think people do a lot of harm for themselves is they'll target by industry. And
Yeah.
really, I think it's the relevance that matters. So I'll give you a couple of things that we'll look for. We'll obviously use a lot of the technographics. So when people buy technology and remove technology from their stack,
Yeah.
it's generally something's happening, right? You want to get them at that moment. So the buying of technology, you can kind of see through a lot of the different sort of technographic providers. That hiring velocity,
Mhm.
is another one. So we'll look at hiring. So when you're hiring people and you're firing people, typically that's when you're going to make a decision on something else, right? So or laying people off or whatever. I mean, it kind of indicates other things, right? It could be good or bad, right? But that's for you to test. So job boards, of course, we're constantly learning on that, but that's an obvious one. But we'll see. Also, another one we look for is we're really big on seniority,
Mhm.
new seniority coming into specific departments.
Mhm.
So if I had to kind of like sum it up, it'd be like, you just saw the finance team just got a CFO. All right.
Mhm.
Decisions are going to be made, right? It might be bad, right? You might couple that with like removing technology off their website. Maybe that
Yeah.
CFO is kind of restructuring the way that the company's doing business. But those are certain signals we do. I got another one that we use. We use a lot of web data. So we use cost of marketing. So we use like how much they spend on Google ads and paid
Mhm.
traffic. That's another one that we use that does very well. We also use page scores, things like that. Operationalizing a lot of this is a little bit tricky, but it's
Yeah.
something where you could do it with a research team. You definitely could, right? It's not hard. But these are the types of things that we're doing right now that are working for us.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, actually building this out is very hard on any account list that you want to target, right? So most people like is I have a bunch of Python scripts together, and I would just go scrape. For example, one of the things I was doing recently was looking at people who are hiring SDRs, particularly remote SDRs, right? That was a signal for us that hey, these people will probably implement a new prospecting tool. So let's see if we could jump in at the right moment. But it was like hard to find because LinkedIn doesn't give this to you inside of Sales Navigator very cleanly, right? Like hiring with keyword SDR. So those things I think are very interesting. It's just that a lot of people don't have the know-how or the bandwidth to build the stuff in-house, right?
Yeah, it's hard. What we did is we obviously work with great platform providers like stuff that you're doing, but we also really what we're doing is we got to really try to invest is in the low code no code world. So what I
Yeah.
mean by that is you really got to start to learn. You got to have somebody in your organization that can take a webhook and process it, and they can actually take that data and result it somewhere. Now that person isn't going to probably be one of your SDRs doing it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're going to need to think a little bit smarter here because one of those people, and I've hired many of these folks before, and some of them didn't know what they were doing, right? It was like a Mr. Miyagi thing, like wax on, wax off. You don't know what you're doing until the end when you kick the guy out. But I mean, that was happening is I would see opportunities to enable your sort of sales development people, or that might be a little more technical and they were like kind of indecisive in their career. Sometimes like the really technical isn't as much of a fit, but if you get that blend of like a little
Yeah.
bit of technology, a little bit of marketing, kind of sales, like that really goes a long way. Bridges that have points of failure start to fail, right? And if you don't have that, you can go across more of the technology and you can do that, but you can actually do it and implement it.
Yeah.
And I like to look at it like I do this stuff. Like I'm not just sitting back and saying, "Oh, here's all this theory that like." God, I might, some of these people take all the oxygen out of the room anytime you read any of their posts. It's like, can you save some oxygen for the rest of us? But anyways, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I completely understand. And the way I look at it is I almost look, so I'm an engineer by training, right? Like I used to code and I used to work with some of the, Silicon Valley startups. So I definitely try to look for like an engineering mindset, not really an engineer, but like a tinkering mindset. Like they should be comfortable with, like putting stuff together somehow, while at the same time a little bit of copywriting and that sort of artistic. So it's like the left brain right brain thing. You have a little bit of analytical comfort, but at the same time you're okay with writing email copy as well, and thinking more, what makes somebody reply to a cold email. So yeah, it's definitely hard. Otherwise a lot of people would be hired in these roles, right? Like it's just very hard to fill these roles.
I've actually spent a good deal of time developing some of these folks. So
Yeah.
if they're really smart and I see they can figure out, one of the things I look for is curiosity of technology. Like, when I was an SDR, I was always like, wait a second, how many? Okay, so I started to do the math. I'd be like, okay, well, why are we all sending emails? Why do we need 5 people? Why can't just one person hit a button and do it, right? I always used to ask that question, and I never got I never got a good answer. So I kept pushing hard on that. And what I found out is you really only need one person to hit the button. I mean, at the end of the day, you might need a little bit of support on the operations side and stuff like that. But this is one of the things that I think is changing, if you will. What's changing in the world of growth and SDRs and everything else going on. I mean, it's very scary. Because if you don't pivot now, look, AI is not going to, it's the people that are using AI and using technology, machine learning, predictive modeling, that understand it. I mean, look, just knowing how to get the algorithm to work in your favor on LinkedIn, just knowing how to get into the inbox, email delivery. I mean, that's the stuff that really, really matters right now. And it's not doing more of the same, because that stuff, a lot of this stuff just doesn't work anymore. I know your sales methodologies are really important, and there's a lot of money made on those sales methodologies, and I get it. And you got to deploy them across teams. But hey, if you're not talking to any sort of people about your product and service, you're probably not going to need that, ancient sales methodology that you've been using for the last 50 years.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. I think it's the era of leverage, right? It's the era of people who can use technology to get leverage. Right now, Chat GPT is commoditized, right? Who are the people who will use it most effectively? The people who figure out the right prompts, right? Like the leverage always keeps increasing as more tech gets deployed into the world, right? World of sales, world of marketing, world of business, essentially. So ultimately, any role, even marketing today, right? Like marketing, copy, and all of the people who are just writing stuff on the website, even those roles will evolve and change. Anyway, yeah, let's get back to a couple of questions and then we'll quickly wrap up. Yeah. Multi-channel, do you do it?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, multi-channel is working better for us. It works a lot better when you're calling into fewer accounts, fewer accounts. So if your TAM is like, I mean, I look at it like, let's say your TAM is like the global 8,000, you have a $50,000 sale, works really well. Where sometimes it doesn't, and it's not that it doesn't work. It works everywhere. I mean, 100%, you have to, because some people, you don't know with the audience, you got to get that audience and figure out how they communicate with people. But sometimes we can go way faster on email because of the fact that email is not really owned by any sort of like technology company, right? You can always scale up company or people on like different social media platforms, but ideally they work at your company. There's a little bit of I think, integrity wise, like if you're reaching out with fake names and fake bots, there's always a challenge there. But I think if you do it with real people in your company, but probably get everybody doing that, that's great. But then if you look at email, I mean, you could 10x the emails, because it is a volume game when you're really good at conversion. It eventually goes back to volume, right? Like I would say in the beginning, they'll focus on conversion, but then obviously I get bored of that pretty quickly. Like it's not, you want to start scaling. So you want to get back to volume. So yeah, we do omni-channel. We do it through any of the ones that are like legal means or not violating terms of service of any platform. We would never do that. There's just no reason to do that. So anyways, you got what I'm saying. So that's kind of how we do it.
Makes sense. And have you tried any of those more, upcoming channels like gifting and all of that, or no?
Yeah. So we're doing some tests on WhatsApp. We've stayed away from SMS because of some of the legal ramifications of kind of opting out, and there's a little bit more to it with SMS. So you kind of want to be careful there. You got to get opt-ins on those. But on WhatsApp, you can do really whatever you want there, because it's a platform similar to like you just reach out to people. But so we are doing well there. That's been paying off. really right now though, for most B2B, you're going to be comfortable with your sort of cold email and LinkedIn.
Mhm.
And then, I'd say if I'm adding something to it and I have a few salespeople, we're not doing this, but making calls, of course, right? And being efficient. I think the biggest thing is calling people that pick up their phone, right? And having the numbers validated and stuff like that. That's the other thing. But I mean, I'd say if we had to focus right now for the people that we're helping, a lot of them, most of their customers are on LinkedIn. So we're
Mhm.
fortunate there. We're doing a little more local. We'd probably have to go a little less LinkedIn, a little more email, but yeah, it's all those. I mean, the Global 8,000, if you're targeting those, you're really going to want to do both. You're still going to have email delivery problems in top
Yeah,
Fortune 500 accounts. They have no tolerance for anybody who has anything weird on their domain. And
yeah.
it could literally change in a dime. That's why you got to be careful there, multi-domain. Um, but anyways, yeah. So we're definitely doing a lot of omni-channel. Sometimes the campaigns, if you're going a little more volume, it can be a little trickier to link up, right? The
Mhm.
synergy.
Yeah,
But I think if they get a LinkedIn request from you, then they get an email from you. That's a pretty good sign. So we sometimes will do more of a broad cold email, but then we'll couple it with a certain group that we're targeting a little bit closer that we put them on LinkedIn. That group, we're going to go after them with a more of a omni-channel approach.
I see. Makes total sense. One final question. What was
Yep.
the biggest mistake that you did when you were starting out outbound?
Just reading, it was just listening to other gurus out there. I read a lot of the books. I mean, if I look, there's a book, I won't name the name, but of the
Mhm.
author, but you could look and, fanatical prospector or whatever. But
Mhm.
I look at those books and I'm just like, those are still the top sellers on Amazon, and I think there's time for a change, right? Like a lot of that stuff doesn't work anymore. If I had to summarize that book, it was more of like go out and just beat yourself up, hustle hard and beat yourself up over, getting on. And then when you're not on the phone with them, you're not doing the job. Once I started to ignore most of that information and just kind of do it the way that I thought, I like the scientific process. So I would see it and I would test it like, yeah, that ain't working. And so once I figured that out, so the less time I spent listening to other kind of people and just actually going out there and trying it was massive for us. That was a
Mhm.
big change. And once I did that, it wasn't really close because then I know what to do in sales. I was a good
Yeah.
salesperson. And then now it's just on, laser focus, leverage, technology, data, predictive modeling, alerting, monitoring, all the things that we need to make sure that the infrastructure continues to run, the engine, the machine continues to turn out quality information. I don't even have the conversation about things that are considered spam anymore. We don't do any spamming. That's completely crazy. Like, why would anybody even waste their time doing that anymore, right? Well, I guess because they're
Yeah.
going so big, but um, relevance wise, if you reach out to people and it's relevant, it's not spam. And
Yeah.
the fact that you even have a chance of landing in a folder called spam is very weird. So, anyways, take your rights. Obviously, you should know what you can do on email, LinkedIn, all these different platforms. Understand the platforms and go deep in the platforms. That was the other thing I guess I'd say is like a lot of people aren't deep in the platforms. They kind of like talk about it at a high level, but they actually aren't using them, so they don't really know the changes. And like even the UI changes every day on LinkedIn, and you
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of need to be aware of that, right? You need to understand what's changing, what's doing it. Email, the algorithms are changing on deliverability.
Yeah.
You need to know that. I mean, we're using 3 providers right now. We use Microsoft, Google, and Zoho for a reason because we want to diversify the inbox and we want to
Yeah.
land in the primary. So, anyways, those are some of the things. I really enjoyed the conversation. That was a you know good discussion on how to build a pipeline in the modern age.
I loved it. One final thing before I let you go. What is the thing that you're most excited about trying out for outbound next? Like something at the top of your mind.
Fine. I mean, I'm using a couple tools. I'm sure you guys are all using them. Like I like the Clay.runs of the world, the like the spreadsheet kind of fill in the spreadsheet for you kind of stuff. I like taking APIs and pushing it to the spreadsheets. You could do a pretty sick mail merge when you could start enriching data inside a spreadsheet. That's a huge so that'd be like those are the types of tools and types of things that I'm doing a lot with. Just higher quality data. There's a tool that I just started using that I really like, and it's kind of I think it's going to be my I just could not get around Asana or ClickUp. I just couldn't stay regimented on it. But I really like Fibry for project management, and it's like an Airtable without the limits, is the way I kind of think of it. So it's they just got a bunch of funding, but the products they're actually, I signed up for their startup program and it's free, but I found it to be the good intersection of Asana, Notion, and Airtable. It's kind of like the stuff that I needed there, and it's still, it's, if you think about Airtable, you can't even do a document in it, right? So that's one of the areas that I think Fibry's figured this out. Got a lot of templates in there already. A pretty amazing product that I've started using, also reporting on it and stuff like that. It's really good. So anyways, those are some of the ones I like to try, but I definitely like my fair share of tools, right? We're tool builders, humans, right? Like that's what Steve Jobs said, right?
Yeah.
Steve Jobs, that was his quote.
No, awesome. I really loved the conversation. Thanks for coming on, Jesse.
Great. Yeah, I enjoyed it too. Thanks.
So that's all the time we have, folks. I really enjoyed the episode. I hope you did too. Please subscribe, like, share, comment, whatever you can to spread the word out about cold outreach success stories so more people can enjoy and learn from the show. All right, that's all, folks. Bye-bye.